Alright. Hello, YouTube. Today I decided to do this article. It's called History of California's Black Nations of the California's People, the First Americans to Live in America. The article was written April 3rd, 2017 by Dinah Blackman. Alright, this is how it starts off. According to author James W. Luhmann, his in his best-selling books Lies My Teacher Told, virtually none of the body of knowledge as taught in the curriculum of world history has once 1 ounce of truth regarding the American holiday Thanksgiving. The idea that Europeans brought to civilization to Americas flipped the truth on its head. Here is the expedition of the European explorers actually found upon the arrival of the North American continent in 1580, read through the end of the hidden story of California Black Native Americans, Robert Beverly's American Holocaust. Far, far away, the most beautiful city on earth, 5 times the size of London or Rome, great towers and buildings rising from the water, 60,000 gleaming houses. How spacious and well built they were, the beautiful stonework and cedar wood of the sweet scented trees. Her many streets and boulevards were so neat and well swept despite the multitude of the inhabitants, crisscrossed with a complete network and channels like on an enormous Vincent, but almost remarkable floating gardens that remind of nowhere else on earth, Beverly said. While Europeans were drinking gutter water from the polluted city rivers, huge aqueducts transported America's waters from fresh springs. But what impressed most were the special merchant areas filled with timber and tile and other building materials being bought and sold, as well as green grocery streets where everyone could buy every sort of vegetable, fruit, honey, and past chocolates, astonished by personal cleanliness and hygiene, colorfully dressed populace by their extravagant use of soaps, deodorant, and breath sweeteners. American Holocaust by Robert Beverly. For long before Europe, coming out of their dark age, realized that the world was not flat, there were nations that were scientifically advanced, and there were highly civilized populations with an abundance of gold and wealth, whose history spanned for thousands of years. Ancient America was notably one of the most advanced civilizations in quantity. This was before Christ, before the Spaniards, before the Mexicans, before the Clovis people who crossed the Bering Straits, before what is now known as Native American Indian or Euro conversations. No European has tasted the life of the Indians and can be afterwards not bear to live in any other society. Ben Franklin. The first American Statue of Liberty was created by France as a gift to the United States, which was rejected with a new white Statue of Liberty, which was created. California's Native American identities, the original indigenous inhabitants of California, descendants of West Africa, South America's Olmecs exile empire, 15,000 years ago, 400 BCE, Egypt, Asia, and the Pacific Islands, creating a mixed cultural nation that thrived for thousands of years in peace. They were California blacks or Californians, also referred to the Califians. The California blacks were one of the largest and oldest Native American nations in the Americas. They were the people Europeans originally referred to as red men. The California blacks were followers of principles of Matt, and they studied and exculated and sought and emulated mythical gods of Kemet, including the most importantly Isis, Horus, and Ra. They believed in one supreme God, life after death, and heaven on earth. They were lovingly ruled by a monarchical succession, descendants of African queens, most notably legendary Queen of California and the Pacific Islands, Califia. Their true lineage, a powerful assistance across the globe, has been systematically erased. The worldwide genocide of biblical proportions was launched and is still played to this very day. The truth of the first settlers has been deliberately changed, said Royal, because the truth was too shameful. They stayed in America because their mission had been a failure. They came in search of gold. There is no force in Indian societies, no prisons, and no officers to inflict punishment. We weren't all brought on ships called Jesus, liberty, grace, justice, mercy on our ancestors were already natives of the land long before Columbus' lies. The first Thanksgiving horror. The count that Europeans brought civilization to America is the biggest European lie of all times. The fact that the revisionized history has been and is still being told and taught, the remainder of the genocide continues. The first settlers almost starved to death. If it were not for the help of the natives, they would have. Many Europeans died during this time. They committed suicide and suffered from mental illness, also alcohol addiction. The first settlers took Indians as prisoners and forced them to teach them their art of farming. They had spent most of their days digging random holes in the ground, searching for gold instead of planting crops. Soon they were starving and digging up poor red Indian corpses to eat. After teaching settlers farming and saving them from starvation on the first Thanksgiving, the colonists offered the natives to toast eternal friendship. Soon after, the chief and his family and advisors and 200 followers dropped dead of poison. The true history of the California blacks is a powerful story of global genocide magnitude that is unbelievable. 100 million black and brown people were wiped off the global landscape. American continent with barely a trace. The history of a magnificent empire is a non-existent in pop culture, myths, and Eurovisionary history. 1492. Let the infamous date 1492 be spoken, heard by indigenous ancestors, from now until eternity. The date marks the beginning of the horrific evil and execution and genocide of the indigenous people of Americans, who were predominantly blacks of Africa, Asia, and early history Europeans. Add mixture, a fact that has been covenantally and deliberately left out of world history. This global conspiracy, in addition to the proven particularly of the genocide, owed much to the English and the United States history. was the inspiration for Hitler's concentration camps. Hitler praised the efficiency of America's extermination of the red savages. In 1700, 80% of the United States budget went to attacking Indians, taking their land. 20% of the budget went to education, and spending 80% plus of the Native American population was enslaved or wiped out. George Washington and other USA officials approved the extermination of the Indian race. Pursue Indians until extermination. Thomas Jefferson. Extermination must continue to be waged until Indians become extinct, a complete extinction of the native race. Theodore Roosevelt. No group of people suffered as much from the gold rush as California blacks and other native people. The estimation of numbers in the area of what is now called California before the arrival of the European ranged from 10,315,000 or more, a calculation never officially reported. Even before the gold rush, the population plummeted to 5 to 2.5 million due to slavery, Your invasion, Christian document of discovery, plus Mexican, Indian, and Spanish wars, along with vigilante and milita mass murder, all had taken a toll on the original people. 1800s. On April 12, 1850, California passed a so-called Act for the Government and Protection of Indians. This allowed any white settler to force any Indian found to be without means of support to work for him. Since Indians could not testify against a white person in court, and the Indian could be seized as a virtual slave under the law, many settlers didn't even bother with the law and purchased Indian children outright. Fortunes were made off the sale of women and children. The editorial appearing in the California Mary Steele Appeal newspaper illustrates this practice. It is from mountain tribes that the white settlers draw their supply of kidnapped children, educated as servants, women of purpose of labor or lust. These partners of state whose sole occupation has been to steal young children, squaws, and dispose of them for handsome prices to settlers willing to pay $50 to $60 for a young digger to cook, wait up on them, and $100 for a likely young girl. 1851. 1851's message to the California legislature and the California governor, Peter H. promised. A war of extermination will continue to be waged between the two races until the Indian race becomes extinct. 1852, California paid $100 million revenue from gold fields and to militia that hunted down and slaughtered natives at will. Newspapers chilled the statewide campaign. In 1853, Yorker Herald called the government to provide aid, enable the citizens of the North to carry on the war of extermination until the last redskin of these tribes has been killed. Extermination is no longer a question of time. The time has arrived, the work has been commenced. Let the first man who says treaty or peace be regarded as a traitor. Other newspapers voiced sentiment. In order to clear a way for white settlement, the United States Senate in 1853 authorized committees to negotiate treaties with the Indian tribes of California. Of 250 indigenous nations, 18 treaties were negotiated. The handful of tribes that agreed to give away millions of acres of land in exchange for U.S. government's promise to protect the lands and adequate water and games to sustain the way of life. These lands would contain about 7.5 million acres, or 7.5% of the land area of California. The 18 tribes started moving to their new land location, only to find out the Senate had refused to ratify their treaties instead of treaties. A system of military posts on the government-owned reservations was implemented. Each would put into a place a system of discipline and instruction. The cost of the troops would be borne by surplus production of Indian labor. No treaties were negotiated. Instead, they would be invited to assemble within the reserves. Towns offered bounty hunters cash for every Indian scalp they obtained. Rewards ranged from $5 for every severed head in Shasha City in 1855 to 25 cents for a scalp in Honey Lake in 1855. Indigenous women were forced to wear the severed heads of their husbands and sons around their neck like necklaces for months. Other regions passed laws called collective punishment for the whole village for crimes by natives, up to the destruction of the entire village and all the inhabitants. These policies led to the devastation of over 200 native California communities. In 1857, the state issued $100,000 in bonds to pay for the anti-Indian militias. 1870, California census only recorded 32,000. However, that did not take into the accounts of blacks or other natives who ran away and joined ranks with Somalians and other native nations, those who picked up and moved to safer locations. Black Californians were not part of the Northern California's 18-tribe treaty negotiation of 1853. They continued valiantly to fight oppressive invaders until 1890s. The gold rush signaled the beginning of the end of the land's first people. The gallant California blacks were one of the last great nations to stand up and defend their ancestral home in America. Lands of blacks was over. Well, that was the end of the article. I'll put the link in the description box so you can read it yourselves. I was shocked by all the information that they had up there. And this was the only article I could find. So, I hope you enjoyed it. Bye.